Welcome to this edition of the High Strangeness Factor, copyrighted on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I'm your host, Steve Ward. On the High Strangeness Factor, we examine all aspects of the unexplained and the paranormal. We put a special emphasis on the underlying connections and patterns that link what may appear to be completely different areas of the paranormal, such as UFOs, cryptids, hauntings, and messages from beyond. And let me introduce my co-host tonight, Terrie Seech. Thanks for being on the High Strangeness Factor.
Thanks for inviting me, Steve.
So this will be fun. I want to remind people that you have been on before. Now, the gentleman that calls you his better half, Brian Seech, he was on my first show 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago, for the premiere episode. And then last year, you both were on my show. We couldn't get you on at the same time because of some technical difficulties, as I recall. But so this is kind of, and of course, Brian was just on a couple of weeks ago as well. So it's kind of a tradition to have you guys on around every anniversary date. So I invite people to go back in the archives and check out those shows. First, I want to talk just a little bit to remind people. When Brian was on, we talked a little bit about the Butler Paranormal Conference, and let's talk a little bit about the organizations that you're involved in. The Q and CCS.
Yeah, Center for Unexplained Events and Center for Cryptozoological Studies.
Okay, and those have been around for about how long?
Q since 1986, and CCS it was formed in 2012.
Oh, excellent. And so you guys really have been at this and actually doing real research since that time.
Yes, we have.
It's not just like you guys are sort of hanging out in front of the drugstore having a good time. But I know for a fact, for being a guest in your home several times, you have the infamous S files, which is a great resource for a great library you guys have compiled of stuff that, like Brian has often said, that you're not going to find this stuff on the internet. You know, the fortunately collections, and I also have a fairly decent collection, and we've shared stuff back and forth.
Right.
It's so great that you guys have compiled this great resource, because there have been a lot of people that you have helped with their research, inviting them to your archive. I remember, I think Rosemary Ellen Guiley was one that used some of your material. And I've always been impressed by all the obscure newsletters that you guys have compiled. I mean, stuff that, it's like, I guess, some of the stuff I have from the 70s, because I used to subscribe to some of the obscure British publications that aren't around anymore. So it's just great to have these resources. And it's also great to come over and hang out with the cats and eat pizza.
Oh, they love you coming over, Steve.
Well, so do I. Okay, let's see. So we'll get more into that, because you have a long association with our guest that I'm going to introduce right at this moment when I bring up his little introduction here. Daniel Hagemen is the director of the Butler Organization for Research of the Unexplained. He lives in Butler, Pennsylvania, and his interest in the UFO phenomena began at the early age of 5, when he had his own UFO sighting. This experience led to his interest in this field of research in investigating UFOs and also other areas of the paranormal, covering strange creature sightings in the tri-state area. Now, the tri-state area for you guys would be what? Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia?
Yes.
Okay. His personal UFO experiences led to the creation of the Butler Organization for Research of the Unexplained, BORU, and we'll be talking a lot about that as well. Dan, welcome to the High Strangeness Factor.
Thank you very much, Steve.
So let's see, we've got a lot to cover. By the way, how long have you known Terrie? You guys go way back. Terrie and Brian, I should say. I guess we'll include Brian as well.
I'm going to say going on 14 years.
That sounds about right.
So how did you guys meet? How did you guys first come together?
I I don't really recall, Terry. Do you? I think you guys came to one of our monthly.
We came to one of your meetings. Is how we met you.
And what kind of meeting was that? What were you calling your group at that time?
It was called the Butler Organization for Research of the Unexplained.
Okay.
And we hold monthly meetings. It's always the fourth Wednesday night of each month, and that's how it came about meeting Brian and Terrie. And over the years we've had a lot of interesting people come and go.
So how did I guess we'll start with this. How did this great Butler conference come about, and how? And I know that Terrie, you and Brian have been involved in that since the beginning, haven't you? Since they've been started.
Yes.
Okay. So go ahead and tell us, guys, how did this all initially come about?
Well, the interest is just absolutely tremendous. People wanting to know more about the UFO phenomena, paranormal in general, creature sightings, ghosts, you name it. We cover the whole gambit. But one of the meetings that we had, we kind of put our heads together and said, we should try to put a conference together. And we just kind of haphazardly threw the first one together, and it was a huge success. And over the years, it's just developed into one of the, if not the largest and the longest-running paranormal conference of its kind in the state of Pennsylvania.
Well, that's pretty good because they don't always take off right away. Sometimes it takes several years and a lot of hard work and frustration to get it off the ground. So that's great to hear that it was a hit from the first day, from the first event.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
go ahead.
I was going to say, we do have a lot of work going into it every year.
Right. And you have several volunteers that help put it together. I mean, I know that from being there, you guys have your self-contained. People don't have to go out and eat. You've got your little food bar there where you can actually get lunch or whatever. And it seems that from me looking from the outside in, I've always been impressed by the lineup you guys have. It's a cliche, but there really is something for everybody there. Tell us about your kind of philosophy for putting these for each event together.
Well, we try to. We've had a few repeat guest speakers over the years. Of course, we brought them back by request. We try to have somebody different every year. Everybody has different interests, and what we try to do is we try to cater to those interests. We try to cover all the bases, UFOs, aliens, Bigfoot creatures, ghosts, and anything else that would go along with the paranormal. And, like I said, over the years, it's just grown exponentially and continues to grow. And as long as people are interested and our health holds up, we're going to continue to have an annual event.
Well, yeah, a couple of things. I noticed that you would have people. You don't adhere to one particular viewpoint or philosophy. I noticed that there are UFO people there that are very sort of nuts and bolts oriented. There are others that are look at more the paranormal realm. The same with cryptids. You have people that are more of in the psychic vein. I remember a couple ladies from I forget what the organization was, but it's the one that talks about the Lord Maitreya or whatever coming back, very kind of new age and so forth. So it really does cover everything. And another thing is that I've always been impressed of is it's a 1-day event. So you don't have to it's not 2 full days, but you chalk a lot into that day, and also you've always kept the price very affordable.
Well, it's something that I firmly believe in. We're nonprofit. We're not in it for the money. We're in it to bring the information to the public and to bring the truth, get the truth out there. And as long as we can make enough to carry us over for the next year and so on and so forth, we'll keep trudging along. We would love to have some of these top-notch guest speakers. For instance, one year I contacted Stanton Friedman, has since passed away, which is a great loss to the UFO community. But just to get him to step up to the microphone, and of course you have to figure you got to put him in a hotel, you got to pay for his transportation, you got to pay to feed him, and then house him. But just to step up to the microphone, he wanted $3,800, and that's a price that our group just simply cannot afford. But we ask a lot, trying to get volunteers, people that will speak on the subject, and we try to accommodate them, put them up for one night, 2 nights, and make sure we feed them good while they're there, and try to attract a big crowd so it's not a waste of their time.
Yes, but you have had some, John Tenney was there the last event, and he's very well known. He's known not just regionally, but he's known, he's been on a lot of reality shows and so forth. And he was a really dynamic speaker. But the speakers that are, that we say are not as well known, you just really have a lot of very, very high quality speakers. Now, I noticed that, Terrie, you and Brian have not taken advantage of your connections with Dan, and I don't think you have. Have you spoken more than once there over the years?
No, we only spoke the one time, and it was the 10th conference we had. We spoke at, and then Dan also spoke at his own conference.
Okay, so you guys just really step back and let the other people in. Maybe we should get you guys up there again. And let me just mention a couple other things that make it such a fun conference. It's held at the Tanglewood Center, right? And
yes.
What's the actual suburb that it's in?
It's actually Lindor, but the address is Butler, PA.
Oh, okay.
And it's the Tanglewood Senior Center.
Okay, and it's very close to several motels if people have to stay overnight. Several high quality motels.
There are several motels or hotels within a mile or two from the location that the conference is held.
And another thing that makes it fun is you have a lot of drawings during the day. There's a lot of people there that build up these really great baskets of goodies. And I think I might have even won something once. Not a basket, but something. But it's just there's just a lot of fun to be had. And it's a lot, it starts at about 10 o'clock in the morning, roughly?
That's correct. Of course, we get there at 8 o'clock in the morning for setup, and then we open the doors to the public at 10 a.m., and then we wrap it up about 6:30 in the evening. So it's a long day, but it's a day that's just full of activity and lots of fun.
And then the tradition is that we all go to a restaurant afterwards, which is always a good time.
Oh, absolutely. Got to get together and make sure that we have some good food and just spend some quality time with one another.
Well, that's kind of what people. When you're at one of these things, you really just don't want to go home. So Terrie, what kind of chores do you and Brian have to do to help set up?
Well, you mean the day of or prior to? Because we work on this for a year, every year.
I guess maybe I'll ask a different question. That'll take the rest of the hour. But people, it is good that people know that these things don't just happen. You guys, you have to put your publicity out. You got how much
we get to speak. We try to get the speakers, find who we can get to speak. I take care of the vendor table, so I'm sending out the vendor forms and collecting,
Right.
their forms and the payment, and sending that on to Dan. And the day of, it's setting up the tables, making sure the vendors, when they come in, they know where they're going to be setting up at, making sure they have what they need in regards to electricity or whatever.
Oh, right. There's a lot to consider.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. I had a question that just escaped me. Um, so, yeah, right. Then the day of, you've got everything has to come together. And this dynamic question that I had will come back to me. I'm very good at that. Okay, so oh yes, that was it. I know it's been kind of a strange year because it was canceled last year for obvious reasons, but
Right.
are there any tables available for this year, or did everything carry over?
We do have, we actually rent 2 halls. We have, the front hall is already filled up. That's the main hall where the guest speakers put on their presentations. And then we have a hall that's just to the back of that. And there is still some room available, but it's filling up quick.
Well, the disadvantage, of course,
Yeah, a lot of the vendors we just carried over from from 2020.
right. The back hall is the disadvantage is that if you're manning a table, you can't hear the speakers as easily. But on the other hand, you're going to get a lot of foot traffic back there anyway. So, and it's a place where people go if they don't want to interrupt the speakers. They can go back there and wander around. And there's quite a bit of room in there. There's a lot more tables, a lot not more tables, but there are a lot of tables in that room as well. So I guess that anything else about the conference that I should mention?
Well, like you stated earlier, we provide people with something to eat if they choose to partake of that, so they don't have to go out and look for an eatery out around Lindora or Butler, PA. We have a menu of, hot dogs, chili dogs, kraut dogs, standard mustard, catsup, and pickles. We do meatball hoagies. We do nachos and cheese. We have pop, water, coffee, fruit, candy, potato chips. We try to provide a nice variety, and again, we keep the prices at a minimum.
Well, that's really great. I mean, and the other thing is, it's kind of like for most of us, with the winter months going away, it's sort of like the first paranormal event of the season.
That's true.
So we all look forward to that. Okay, now, Dan, let's find out how. I mean, all of us have kind of a journey that we've taken to get where we are. There's something that happened in our past, whether it's an experience or just for me, it was just it was an interest in what was, reading the books of Frank Edwards, his anthologies, and then the sightings in Michigan, South Central Michigan in 1966, followed by the Mothman a few months later. So those are the kind of things that spurred me on. But for you had an experience when you were very young, right?
Yeah, actually, it was late 1958. I was 5 years of age. It was on a Sunday, and of course, Sunday, the whole family got together, and whether we wanted to or not, we had to go to our grandparents and spend the day, and we were on our way home. My uncle had a 1950, I think it was a 58 Ford Fairliner or Skyliner, and this car, half of the roof, I don't know if it was plexiglass or some kind of shatterproof glass, but from where the back seat, the back of the front seat started to the windshield, you could look up through the roof. My uncle was driving. I was sitting center front. My mom was on the passenger side. My 2 sisters and my aunt were in the back seat. And, of course, my mom, I guess I was kind of mischievous at that age, and she kind of nudged me with her elbow and said, "Why are you being so quiet?" And, of course, I'm looking up through the roof, and I'm watching these two disc-shaped objects. They were approximately 2 to 3 feet apart, and you could clearly see that they were spinning in opposite directions. They actually looked like something was burning, something was on fire. And I told my mom, I said, "Well, I'm looking at the funny lights in the sky." And, of course, simultaneously, my uncle and my mom, they both looked up. And my mom, she hollered at my uncle and said, "You keep your eyes on the road, you're going to get us killed." Well, at that point, he pulled the car over to the left side berm of the road, shut the ignition off, turned the headlights off, and he stepped outside the car. And when the car came to a stop, these things stopped directly above us. You could clearly see that they were getting bigger, so whatever it was had to be coming down. The spinning never stopped. Again, they were spinning in opposite directions of one another. And my uncle was the type of guy that really wasn't afraid of anything, but you could clearly see that he was upset. And he jumped in the car. My mom said, "Jack," his name was Jack, "Jack, what do you think that is? What do you think that is?" And he started the car up, never turned the headlights on, and peeled out. My mom's hollering at him, "Turn the headlights on, turn the lights on, you're going to get us killed." And as soon as the car started to move, these things again started to follow the car directly above us. We drove approximately a mile, and of course the section of road that we were in, there's a very large waterway called the Oneida Valley Dam. He again pulled over to the left berm of the road, shut the ignition off. Of course, he turned the headlights off, and again these things stopped directly above us, still continuing to get larger in size. Now, when I first saw these, they were probably about the size of a saucer that would come with a dinner set. Like your teacup saucer.
So you mean if you were to see them at arm's length, they would be that big, but their physical size was actually bigger?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
At arm's length, it'd be the size of a teacup saucer.
Okay.
When we stopped the second time, and of course they continually were getting bigger, by this time they were larger than the dinner plate. And I'm going to say probably 14, 15 inches in diameter. At that point, they were pretty good size. Again, after a minute or so, my uncle jumped in the car and again peeled out. And at that point, we hit a hard hairpin turn to our left. And then not quite a hairpin turn to the right. It was kind of like an S configuration, and immediately went into a group of trees. You could look up through the canopy, and these things were so bright, it was actually casting light down onto the pavement. And then eventually the canopy was so dense, you could no longer see these objects. But he must have drove 80 mile an hour the whole way, the rest of the way till we get home. And, of course, my mother, she got myself and my two sisters into bed, and her and my uncle and my aunt, I could hear them, should we call somebody? What do you think it was? Do you think it might have been a plane that was going to crash? And eventually fell to sleep. Well, it was within a day, 2 days, picked up the Butler Eagle, and it made headline news. It was on the bottom of the front page. Butler County residents startled by unidentified aerial object.
Now, were these other residents, or did your family report it?
Well, no one from my family reported it, but apparently there were other people that had seen what I saw or we saw, and they in turn reported it.
Well, it must have given them some comfort to know that somebody else saw it.
Correct. To know that it was in the paper, to know that other people saw the same thing, described it just like I stated, kind of gives you a good feeling to know that you're not seeing things, you're not crazy. That started my interest in the UFO phenomena.
And again, you were how old then? Was it?
I was 5 years of age.
5 years. Wow. This is a question that you probably can't answer. Do you think there's any possibility that you guys had any missing time?
I've been asked that a lot over the years, and I've really gave it some serious thought. To be honest with you, I do not know. I know that my mother, my uncle, my aunt, they've had their own experiences over the years.
Really?
And of course, as I got older, I was in my teens. I can remember my mother talking about different incidents that she had, actually downright terrifying.
Really? So you're one of these, I mean, that this happens in families sometimes where sometimes it's generational, sometimes it's just other members of the family many of them have had some kind of an experience. Before you go on with your story, are you able to tell us a little bit about what your mom found so terrifying?
Well, over the years, my mother, my whole entire family really has experienced multiple sightings. One story that my mother shared with us, or shared what she could. Unfortunately, my mom, she's gone. She passed away several years ago. And when she was in hospice, I tried to get her to talk about it because I wanted to know. And every time my mom would get to a certain point, you would see her eyes would tear up. She would have very heavy, rapid breathing, and just having a very, very difficult time talking about it, to the point to where she would literally freeze up. What had happened was my whole family has been plagued with severe migraine headaches. And of course, anybody that has had severe migraine headaches, they know how debilitating they can be. They can really make you miserable. But this particular night, my mom, she was getting myself and my two sisters ready to go to bed, and kept complaining about, how sick she was with this headache. She tried to, I remember, ice pack on the back of her neck, ice pack on her forehead. She tried to lay down, could not lay down, and ended up going to the living room and was going to try to sit upright on the couch to get some sleep, and of course was unable to do so. Of course, all the lights are off. If you could visualize the apartment that we lived in, the rooms were all extremely large, laid out in kind of like a rectangle, more toward a square, but rectangular, if you can visualize that. You'd come in the front door, and you'd come up 14 steps. You'd make a left, then you'd make a right. You'd come up about 10 more steps, and then you'd come onto a little landing, and then you'd proceed into the hallway, which is about another 4 steps. And of course, you come into the hall. If you went to the right, you went back into the kitchen. If you made a left, you went into the living room. My mom was trying to get comfortable, and she said all at once, the hallway lit up like the sun had just come up. All the other rooms were dark, but the hallway, she said the light was so piercing you kind of had to shield your eyes. And she said she sat on the edge of the couch, and she said she could see the outline of an arm and a gloved hand coming up the steps, but the hand was on the railing. She said she sat there horrified, and she said all at once she saw the perfect silhouette of a humanoid. It came up, cleared the top step, turned, and started coming toward her. She said she clasped her chest. She tried to scream. She felt paralyzed and could not do so. She said as this humanoid crossed through the doorway into the living room, all she remembers is waking up on the floor in front of the couch, and it was broad daylight. She called my uncle that day and pleaded with him to come over and stay. That's how scared she was. She told my sisters to make sure to keep all the curtains closed on the windows, make sure all the windows were locked. That very next night, again, she's plagued with this horrific migraine. Of course, all the lights are on in the house, every room, every light. And I remember complaining to my mom, how are we supposed to go to sleep with the lights on? And of course, her response was, shut up and get to bed. She went in and sat down on the couch, and this was probably about midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. She heard a noise, and she immediately looked into the hallway, and it was just a reverse of what had happened the night before, only this humanoid was completely outlined and was coal black. Couldn't see any facial features. It just the perfect outline of a humanoid. And of course it turned, started coming toward her. And again, as it crossed from the hallway into the living room, the next thing she remembers is waking up. It's daylight, and she's on the floor in front of the couch.
Did this go on for a long period of time, or was that it?
Well, I found out, years later. This happened a couple times a year. My mom never really told us until, she was in hospice, but, she had all these scoop marks all over her body. She had these scars that she had no explanation for.
So for her, it was really that kind of a textbook abduction experience.
Correct. And it was very horrifying, so horrifying that she just simply could never really complete the whole story behind it.
Well, apparently she never went under any kind of regressive therapy to find out what had happened.
No.
I don't blame her. And what about the rest of the family? Did anybody else have similar experiences? I know you saw lights in the sky and so forth, but did anybody else have what might be a similar abduction experience or missing time?
There was one particular evening. Again, the layout of the house plays a very important role as to how things transpired. You'd come up the steps, make a right, and there was a long hallway that would take you back to the bathroom. You'd go through another doorway, and you're in a huge kitchen. You'd make a left and go through a door, and that was my sister's bedroom. You'd make a left and go through a doorway. I got the smallest bedroom in the house. My sister shared a bedroom, but center bedroom was mine. And then, of course, you'd go through a doorway into another huge room, which was my mother's bedroom. And then, again, left through a doorway into the living room, and so on and so forth. But one particular night, my sisters and I fought like cats and dogs, and I guess that's normal.
Yes, it is.
But we had there wasn't a doorway between my room and my sister's room. And, of course, constantly fighting, stay out of my room, you stay out of my room, you know how that goes. And my mom had this big trunk, and she put it between the doorway between my sister's room and my room. We had 2 dogs, and, of course, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, house is pitch black. and it literally sounded like somebody was killing both of my sisters. The dogs were just lunging and baring their teeth, and I never heard a dog growl like that ever since. I mean, it's stuck with me. It's unbelievable, but screaming so loud it woke my mom up. She came flying through the doorway into my room, went to go into the my sister's room and forgot about the trunk, and of course she literally flew and ended up right at the foot of my sister's bed. And she's hollering at him, what the H is the matter with you guys, and what are you screaming for, and what's going on, and somebody get the light. Well, the light, it wouldn't work. You're flipping the light switch, and it wouldn't work. My mom's trying to get the dogs calmed down. And my youngest sister, I'm the youngest of three, so it would have been the younger of my two sisters. I remember her screaming that there was someone in the room with big black eyes. I get goosebumps talking about this.
Wow.
But she swore that there was someone or something in their bedroom. And I mean, it had the dogs riled up like I've never seen in my entire life. And of course, you know, my mom, she went and got a flashlight. She come back. And I remember my mom having an electrician come in that very next day, and he could not find anything wrong with the electric whatsoever.
Did it come back on?
I'm sorry?
So it was working again?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Wasn't anything wrong with it. And we never did find out what it was or who it was. But like I said, the reaction from the dogs and whatever it was really scared both of my sisters very badly.
So were you, I know that your mom wouldn't talk about certain aspects of it, but did you guys ever talk about these things, some of these strange things that went on as a matter of course, or was it just not talked about?
Over the years, holidays, I'd usually host, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter dinner, and try to get as many of the family members in my home as I could. And I remember sitting around the dinner table, and of course we're talking, and somebody would bring it up. Hey, remember this, or hey, remember that, or hey, remember when, so on and so forth. And I tried to get them to talk about it. But again, it's just something that was just so horrifying, such a terrible experience for them that they just really didn't want to talk about it.
Terrie, did you have any questions at this point, or?
Yeah, Dan, did you or your sisters ever go under hypnosis to find out what, happened to you guys when you were younger?
My oldest sister, over the years, I think she's attempted it 2 or 3 times, and they get to a certain point where they call it or refer to it as a block. And, they just can't seem to go any deeper. I know myself, over the years, I've had many, many, many people tell me that I should go under regressive hypnosis because of the different experiences that I have had. And I'm kind of tore down the middle. 50% of me wants to do it, but 50% of me more or less is telling me you're not ready. You're not ready to cope with what you'll find out. I remember one year I was introduced to this lady that clairvoyant or psychic or whatever you call them, and very frail old woman. And when I extended my hand out to shake her hand, she clasped my hand between both of hers, sandwiched my hand between both of hers.
Mm-hmm.
And she was looking me directly in the eye. And the first thing that came out of her mouth was, "You have been taken 23 times.
Wow.
And how long ago was that?
I used to go to a monthly meeting up in Greenville, and of course the lady that held it, she just, the phenomena was just, she just lit up with it. It just flowed through her veins.
Did she give you any more information than that? Did she say why or give you anything else?
Well, she told me that she said, for me to keep doing what you are doing, you will learn in time as to why you have been taken. And those were her words, quote unquote. Sharon, the lady that held the monthly meetings, for somebody that was so interested and so alive, all at once she did a 360-degree turn. She had a big horse farm. She sold everything she owned because she felt compelled to go to Sedona, Arizona. And she went out there, and the first couple of years she was there, you get an email from her or some type of correspondence, and it's just like she literally vanished off the face of the earth. Those that were in close contact with her, they were actually worried because they couldn't get in touch with her. And until this day, I literally don't know what happened to her.
Did you or any of your family members ever report any other kind of paranormal experiences? The reason I ask, it seems that some people that I've talked to that have had abduction type experiences, and this is kind of reflects John Keel's research as well. A lot of them have had all kinds of other experiences, haunting type phenomena, poltergeists, shadow people, even some of them are even witnesses to various cryptid type phenomena. So is there a history of that kind of electronic interference, and the list goes on, but is there any kind of history of other strange happenings that surround you or your family?
Well, I don't know how much time we have. There are a lot.
Just give us a few examples, because I want to go on afterwards and find out what your journey after that, some of your influences, some of your ideas. But go ahead.
Used to deal with a bank that was at our local mall. You'd walk through the door, and the first business on the left was a bank. And of course, I got paid on Fridays, so would load up the kids and would go in. I'd cash my check or deposit my check, and then would go get a bite to eat, and then maybe walk through the mall and see what was there, and so on and so forth. I'd walk in, and of course, Fridays is one of the busiest days for the bank. And I'd walk in, and there'd be 5-6 people standing in line, and they had like 6 tellers. It was a really large bank. And I'd walk in, and I'd get in line, and their computers would go offline. And a lot of upset people, man. I mean, believe you me, a lot of upset people. And this went on for 2-3 months. Every time I'd go to the bank, it got to the point where the branch manager asked me not to come in the bank anymore. Your banking, you mail your check in here. You have your wife bring your check in for a deposit, but unfortunately, we don't know what it is, and I'm not really blaming you, but you can't come in our bank anymore.
So instead of being wanted, you were not wanted.
Well, I'd get near a AM/FM radio, and of course, whatever channel you'd be listening to, whatever station, would go off the air to nothing but static. I'd walk away from the radio, and of course, the station that you were listening to would come back on. And this went on for several years. I'd have trouble with electronics in my home. Just never really fully understood it. I just kind of blew it off.
Well, Whitley
But,
Strieber, the famous, he wrote Communion and all those other books. He describes the same thing, and so do several other people that have had some kind of a contact or experiences.
well, I know I've got markings. I've got a scar on the back of each one of my hands that it looks like somebody took and drove a spike completely through my hand. Mother wanted to know one time, sitting beside her at Thanksgiving, and she said, "What'd you do to your hand?" Because the scar was very prominent. I looked at her. I says, "I don't know. Maybe you can tell me. I have no idea. Excuse me. I've got a few scoop marks on my legs, and first and foremost, I'm not saying that I've been abducted. I've had people tell me that they have very strong suspicion that I have been, but I've got markings that I cannot tell you how I came about them, and I know that I've never injured myself to get these kind of markings.
Let me just stop you for a minute. I'm going to do my station identification here. You are listening to The High Strangeness Factor, copyrighted on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I am Steve Ward, and my co-host today is Terrie Seech, and we are talking to Dan Hagemen about his personal experiences with the unknown. Just a few wild questions. Have you ever experienced a shadow person?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Just have you ever experienced strange phone calls or strange phone interference?
Oh, yeah.
This is classic because this is John Keel. This is the reason I bring it up. John Keel is sort of the mentor I never knew. He would tell the researchers, say, listen, don't just focus on one area. He'd say, ask the contactee, the experiencer, what they had for breakfast. And what he meant was, it was a euphemism for find out all about them. And he was finding out the same thing. Somebody that had a UFO experience was even likely to have seen shadow people, poltergeist experiences. What about, have you ever seen a cryptid yourself?
I have, yes, sir.
And what about, okay, here's the wild one. Have you ever had something like that you might call a man in black experience, with the idea that, of course, the man in black term is a generic term, doesn't necessarily literally mean that they were dressed in black suits. But have you ever had any experience that might fall under that general category?
I would say since I've been involved with the Butler Organization for Research of the Unexplained, at least 8 or 10 times over the years that I've been doing this.
Wow. I expected to say, well, no, I didn't have anything like that. Okay. Before I go on, Terrie, anything else you'd like to bring up? I know you've known Dan for years, so
Yeah.
go ahead. Just anything you'd like to bring up.
Dan, I remember you telling me and Brian a story about you when you were younger, that you thought you might have been abducted, that you were found behind something in your house, or...
Yeah, that's the house where my mother had the horrifying experience with the entity or the humanoid. I remember she was telling me that we were going to be getting company, and for me to be on my best behavior, and it was the Electrolux sweeper guy was coming. Our laundry room was off the kitchen, and we had the hot water tank was placed in the corner of 2 walls inside the laundry room. Well, the Electrolux sweeper guy came, and of course he brought in what he could carry, and he had to make a few other trips out to his vehicle to bring in everything he was going to demonstrate. And I'm sitting on the floor, and I was kind of pudgy. I've always been, I guess, kind of pudgy, chunky my entire life. But he grabbed a hold of the hose, and he was flailing it around. And when I saw that hose, I literally freaked out to the point to where I ran back into the laundry room looking for a place to hide. And I managed, for as pudgy as I was, to squeeze back in the corner behind the hot water tank. And I stayed there because I couldn't get out. My mother couldn't get me out. She literally had to hire a plumber to come and disconnect the hot water tank and move it so I could get out from behind it.
What, obviously this brought up some suppressed memory or something. What, do you have any idea what that triggered in your memory that made you react terrified like that?
Over the years I've had, including back when I was very young, I call them virtual dreams. Everybody dreams. And of course, you'll wake up, if it's to go get a drink of water or go to the bathroom or whatever the case may be, and you'll think to yourself, wow, that seemed like that was so real. Sometimes you'll go back to bed and you'll lay down, and as soon as you drop off back to sleep, it'll pick right up where it left off. But I've had some horrifying, and still have, not as often, but I still have horrifying dreams. And I know I've spoke about it several times at our monthly meetings. I think Brian and Terrie have heard me talk about it, but it had to do with being in some type of a room, strapped to what I refer to as a slightly elevated stainless steel table, with all these hoses around me and all this, for the better lack of words, some type of equipment, and a massive wall control panel, all these blinking lights and gauges, and all these beings, they're dressed alike. Of course, they're facing this control panel, and they're manipulating and moving these controls around, and I'm laying there screaming at them at the top of my lungs, trying to get somebody to, acknowledge me, and it was just like as if they couldn't hear me, totally ignored me.
Well, I had no idea, Dan. I mean, this is just classic stuff. Keeping in mind, John Keel would talk about the Men in Black, and he stressed that the term was generic because people would have strange visitors. Sometimes they would behave very strangely. Sometimes they said they were Air Force personnel, but there was something wrong about their uniform. You've had several experiences that you said could fall under that general category. Can you give us one or two of those experiences and what happened?
Monthly meetings. Got a phone call, and of course I answered the phone, and immediately the individual said, "Hi, Daniel, how are you today?" Well, back then we didn't have caller ID. I had a non-published phone number, although I know businesses sell that information, but it just kind of took me back that the guy knew my name. And he said, I'm going to go by, you can refer to me as the captain. And he said, I was going through downtown Butler, and I noticed on the marquee in front of the Elks Club that you're holding a monthly UFO meeting. And he said, I'm going to come to your next meeting, and I'm going to bring a friend with me. And my reply was, well, hey, it's open to the public. Bring as many people as you would like. The more the merrier, And the guy asked me several questions and how long I was involved. And, I answered him with honesty. And finally, the call came to an end. And I sat there and I thought to myself, now, wait a minute. How'd this guy know who I was? There's no marquee in front of the Elks Club. So I got in my car, and I drove 15 miles one way to drive down past the Elks Club, and there was nothing. So I pulled into the parking lot, and I went in, and I said, hey, did you guys have a sign out front advertising our monthly meeting? And the guy looked at me, and he says, did you pay for it? And I said, no. He said, no, we didn't have a sign out there. Well, then I really started wondering. So come time for the meeting, I drove a minivan. It was a Plymouth Voyager. And, of course, I had a scanner antenna. I had a CB antenna. I had a cell phone antenna, all on this van. And, of course, some of the guys that make fun of me and whatnot, but there was a brand new white SUV, a van, sitting right in front of the Elks Club, and it must have had 8, 10, 12 different various types of antennas on it. And I got there, and the one guy says to me, oh, it must be nice. We can see who's making all the money. And I looked at him like, what are you talking about? And he says, oh, new vehicle, huh? I just, yeah, right. And I went ahead and went into the meeting room, and somebody else said the same thing. I just kind of thought, well, I don't know what you guys are talking about. Well, anyway, everybody that came was there. We had the doors closed. We're sitting there, and, of course, the Elks Club was scheduled to be tore down the end of that summer. So the doors open up, and this guy walks in, and he's carrying the thermos. Thermos is probably maybe 10, 12 inches high, maybe 4 or 5, maybe 6 inches round. Stepped inside the door, stepped sideways over and against the wall. And I looked at him and I said, well, you're more than welcome to sit down. And they had these high-back wooden chairs that had little stubby arms on them. He sat down in that chair, and he's trying to get comfortable, and he's holding this thermos. And I thought to myself, I kind of looked over, and I thought, well, you know, if you want beer, if you want alcohol, if you want water, whatever you want, you could get here. Why would you bring a thermos? But I didn't say anything. So started the meeting, and at that time we had several new members. And, of course, I always say, you know, if you're new, I'd like to know how you heard about us, what your primary interest is in the phenomena, and if you've had any personal experiences, would you be willing to share those with us? Well, it came time for him to stand up, and he said, before I say too much, I have a message from you from our commander-in-chief. And, I mean, everybody looked at each other and looked over at this guy, and they're thinking, what the heck is this? Ever let go of the thermos? And, of course, he introduced himself again as the captain. Never got a last name, just the captain. He finished up, and as he went to sit down, the thermos slipped out of his hand. And, of course, it flip-flopped and landed about 2 feet away from me. And as it did, there was a severe harmonic distortion in the speakers in the ceiling. And it was loud enough that people had to shield their ears. I slid my chair back, and I went to move toward this thermos, and this guy pounced on that thing like a sumo wrestler. And when he sat up, he righted the thermos, and when he did, again, the speakers made a real loud, harmonic, distorted sound. After the meeting was over, and of course he left before anybody else, and of course after the meetings there was a group of us that would get together and would go to a local eatery and sit around and talk and chit-chat and get a bite to eat. And when we left, I told a group of them, I said, I'll meet you there, but I said, I have a few things here that I need to take care of. Told the one guy that was hanging around waiting for me, I says, come on, come with me. And I went in, walked into the bar, and the bartender, he's cleaning up the top of the bar, and there were 3 guys sitting at the bar, one of which was the maintenance guy. He looked at me and he says, can I help you? And I said, yeah, I got a question for you. I said, at any time tonight during the course of my meeting, were you trying to get a hold of someone through your PA system? And the guy looked at me and he says, what are you talking about? This guy at the end of the bar, he tapping on the end of the bar, and I looked over and he motioned for me with his finger to come over by him, and he said, "Let me show you something." And the bartender says, "Yeah, you show him." But no, we weren't listening. We could care less about your nonsense, and we weren't trying to get a hold of anybody. If we did, would have just physically come into the room. Maintenance guy took me through a double set of doors, and he grabbed a big 8-foot step ladder. Walked into this room. Maybe it was a 10-foot step ladder, but he set it up, and he climbed up, and he moved a couple of the ceiling towel over to the side. And, of course, where he set it, there was a speaker directly above the ladder. He come down, and he says, "Have a look." So I climbed up the ladder, and I looked. Yeah, there are speakers, but there are absolutely no wires, any way, shape, or form, hooked up to any of those speakers. And he says, "I don't know what you're talking about," but he said, "They're tearing this place down the end of this summer." He said, "We pretty much gutted out everything we want." He said, "No, the PA system doesn't even work."
So
buddy of mine, he looked at me, I looked at him. I mean, we're totally dumbfounded. We left, went ahead and went to the eatery that we were going to and did what we had to do. And for the next 6 weeks, several times a day, all hours of the day and night, while I was at work, this guy would call me. And I said, "How'd you get my phone number? How do you know where I work?" And he said, "We need to talk. Tomorrow morning I'm going to pick you up and we're going for breakfast." I says, "No, we're not. I got to work." I said, "I can meet you in the evening." Very, 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 very persistent. And the guy mysteriously vanished as mysteriously as he showed up. That's one of many incidents that we've had with people like that.
Well, it's bizarre. I mean, you've got a van outside with all kinds of antennas, which implies some kind of government surveillance. But then, obviously, the guy isn't being secretive. He comes in, makes a big production of being there, drops his thermos or whatever it is. It's just bizarre. In all these experiences, you ever come across anybody that's kind of odd looking or somebody that just doesn't seem to be able to function properly?
We had a man and a woman, supposedly husband and wife. This was after the captain incident. They showed up for 3-4 months worth of meetings, and everybody said there's something not right with these people. They just don't look right. And a couple of the people referred to her as Plastic Matilda, although didn't have any plastic surgery. And one time she claimed that she was a gun runner for the government. And I mean, just bizarre stories like you couldn't believe. And somebody got a hold of some information on them and did some checking and found out that they actually worked for the government.
This is bizarre. I mean, I've heard stories that the government throughout the years has kind of infiltrated UFO groups and so forth, and you wonder what the heck. That's just bizarre. Terrie, any questions about so far?
No, I'm just amazed at
It's just
that last story.
This is such classic stuff. I mean, I've known Dan for years through the Butler Paranormal, and we've talked a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But Dan, I had no idea that you've been going through this kind of stuff. I mean, it puts me to shame. I've got my library. I had one weird paranormal experience, and that's about it. Well, as far as I know, unless I've had a ton of missing time I don't know about. Let's not go there. But what about you said you had you've seen shadow people?
Yeah, I mean, we still have that. As bizarre as it might sound, the very house that I'm living in, I inherited it from my parents. But we had a Yorkie poo. He was my little buddy. Passed away here, be 2 years. Had heart problems, but I loved that dog. And we'd be sitting there and we'd be watching TV. And of course, one single light on, and he'd sit up and he'd just look out into our front room. And then all at once, he'd start baring his teeth and growling. And I'd look at my wife, and my wife would look at me, and he'd be looking at something or following something with his eyes. Don't know what it was, don't know what he saw, but I know I've had company here. And many times I'm sitting here and I'm watching TV, and you'll see the full outline of no, you can't see any facial features or anything. It's all in black, and you'll see like it'll walk by, like almost go right in or through the wall. And we've even had the Yorkie Poo, which has passed away. Now we have a Shih Tzu, but even the Shih Tzu, he's doing it. And it's kind of unnerving. It really is.
Well, I've used the term shadow people just kind of generic. I mean, that it could be sometimes hauntings look like a shadow or whatever. Sometimes the, in quotes, shadow person seems to be very defined. But it was interesting because Rosemary Ellen Guiley, that we lost a couple of years ago, she was doing an investigation into shadow people, and she was collecting all these different reports. And she found out that a significant percentage of those people seeing shadow people in their rooms or their house or even outside were also experiencing classic, what we would call alien abduction phenomena. So that was just another link where all these things seem to come together. Tell us about, you said you have had a cryptid or maybe more than one cryptid sighting?
I've actually, I can't say 100% for certain. Up around the Kinzu Dam area, I've got a friend of mine that lives up there, and I've been up there several times, couple 3 nights, and we'll just go out and we've casted multiple Bigfoot impressions, the foot impressions, but I'm almost 100% positive that I've physically seen a Bigfoot, but until I can get a picture or, prove to myself that that's what I'm looking at, I can only say that I think I've seen one. I've investigated many Bigfoot sightings along with UFO sightings. And then, of course, I'm sure you're aware of this winged entity that we deemed it the Shakora gargoyle.
Yes, Brian talked about that recently.
Interviewed many people that have had sightings with this creature, and if you were to take all the written reports that these people compiled and sit down, you would swear that they copied off of one another. That description, everything is so matching that beyond a shadow of doubt that these people have had to have seen something.
Well, that's the important thing is the groundwork that you're doing and that Brian and Terrie do to collect all these reports and to make those correlations. Okay, so I didn't know I'd be on this part of the show for so long, but it's just fascinating, and we could go on for a long time. But I'm just curious as to, you had those early experiences as a child, and apparently this kind of spurred you on to look into UFOs. I remember when I first became introduced to it, I went to my local library and got out every book I could on it, which wasn't too many. And there were books like by the contactees, which we generally think of as not as credible, but then there were books by Donald Kehoe and so forth. Tell us a little bit about how it started for you, your research and your exploring. What books or what researchers inspired you?
Well, again, the first sighting I've had at the early age of 5. Then, of course, you had the Betty and Barney Hill incident, and that really, really sparked my interest. I remember reading and rereading and reading over and over and over and over again the story behind that. But, many authors. I've got tons of books around here, but trying to think of some of the names of the books. I just lost my train of thought.
No, that's all right.
But many authors that have written books on abduction and have written books on different alien species. Supposedly there are many alien species. The UFO phenomena. It's just, once it gets in your blood, it's there.
Well, I can see where the Betty and Barney. I mean, it really electrified me too. But for me, it was academic. For you, it was like, yeah, I've been there. I know what they've been through, and they as you probably remember they did just a great made-for-TV movie called The UFO Incident that was based on the Betty and Barney Hill experience. James Earl Jones portrayed Barney Hill, and Estelle Parsons played Betty Hill. And they used the actual transcripts from their hypnotherapy sessions, and it was just really well done. Did you happen to see that when it first came on?
I did.
Yeah, we were all gathered around the TV set with our cassette recorders at the time to try to capture it. But I don't know if you've looked at what happened to them afterwards, because it seemed like they had some of the experiences like you did. It's almost like some of the things that happened to Betty and Barney Hill after the abduction experience were even stranger. I mean, they experienced poltergeist phenomena in their house. They said they had classic haunting phenomena. They had people peering into their windows all the time. Men in coveralls saying that they had to come in and read their meter, and it turned out they weren't the actual gas company or whatever. But yeah, so they had a whole, and even got stranger than that. So how did you research? What kind of areas did you focus on? As you got older and as you were reading books and studying, what path did you take?
Well, primarily interested in the UFO and alien phenomena. Have firmly believed all my life that we're not alone. We've been lied to all our lives. But over the years, through starting with just the UFO phenomena, and being called out to investigate a Bigfoot sighting followed by a UFO sighting, or a UFO sighting followed by a Bigfoot sighting, to see the trace evidence, the footprints, the burn marks. Something caused those. Oakland Township here in Butler, back in March of 1990. Aurora Hills of Butler, there was a craft that had come down. There were 9 oval burn marks, and those burn marks were in groups of 3. They formed a perfect triangle, each group. The impression was charred black. The soil was burnt several meters deep. There were pop cans or beer cans that were crushed like tinfoil. Tops of the cans were coal black. You could flip the can over and you could literally read every word of print that was on the can. If you took pictures of the ovals, around the outer edge of the oval, there was an indentation. It was deeper than the oval impression itself. And if you took still pictures or you took video, those indentations around the outside edge of that oval, or those 9 oval marks, looked like they were full of smoke or fog. Couldn't see it when you looked at it with the naked eye, but it showed up in still pictures or video. And then about a quarter of a mile away, up over a hill, there was a humongous burned circle. So they speculate that whatever left the 9 oval impressions was a craft that was having trouble, and there were actually two objects seen leaving the area that were unidentified. So they think the large circle was the mother craft, and the 9 oval impressions was a smaller craft that was attached or associated with the bigger craft. NASA sent up a investigation team. They compiled a report. I know there's a researcher that lives out in Greensburg. His team came over and investigated it. There were several people around Butler County didn't know one another, but as it turns out, they all were taking video of these objects, and one of them was a perfectly shaped diamond. The light that it was giving off or emitting was brighter than the sun, and this thing teetered back and forth like these old child tops. You'd plunge them, and then when they started running out of steam, they'd start teetering back and forth real fast. And till this day, no one really knows what they were.
Now, this is something you were involved in on the investigation?
We conducted our own investigation, although there were, several, like I said, NASA and another research group from out around the Greensburg, Pittsburgh area that conducted an investigation.
Now, did you say that there were also Bigfoot sightings around the same time?
Absolutely. Bigfoot sightings. We've had Bigfoot sightings, Great Belt Road down off of Route 356. We've actually had Bigfoot sightings in Highfield, which is not maybe within 3-4 miles of where we hold our annual conference. Sawmill Run Road, which is in less than a mile away from where we hold the conference. Just a lot of Bigfoot sightings in the area.
I know in 73 and 74 there was a wave of Bigfoot, and in some cases they even saw the craft or strange light or whatever in the same area as the Bigfoot. Did you ever have any notion? I mean, I've been interested in these high strangeness areas for a long time, where all these what people think are different paranormal phenomena happening in the same area. But do you have any notion as to why there are certain areas where things that we think of as different in different categories are experienced at the same time or in the same area?
Well, I know there's been a lot of speculation that a lot of this goes on around the ley lines, magnetic lines on the Earth's surface. And, so many reports. How is it that Bigfoot is so elusive? How is it that nobody's ever found the remains of a Bigfoot? Possibly interdimensional. Portals that open and close, or they can open and close them at will. Same with the UFO phenomenon, or these things coming through portals. It's all speculation, and until it's proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, really your guess is as good as mine. Although I think our government knows, and they're just withholding the information from us.
Well, that if they do know, the last thing they're going to do is admit it, because what are they going to do about it? I mean, they're completely powerless over whatever this is. So they're not going to say, "Oh yeah, all these strange things are going on," but guess what? We can't stop it, we can't control it, and we don't even really know fully what it is. So they're probably
they don't.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think, like you said, they can't stop them. They're really powerless, and because of that, they're not about to acknowledge it.
So, Terrie, did you know all these deep, dark secrets about Dan?
Yeah, most of them I did.
You've already heard the stories.
Brian did go with a group up to that the burn marks that he was talking about.
Well, I remember Brian told me that you guys, I guess, went out to, I don't know when this was, but you were on kind of a Bigfoot expedition in an area where I think it had been seen or maybe heard, and the group saw a light overhead, a strange meandering light that couldn't easily be explained.
Yeah, that was Brian and our son.
Well, that's not a bad deal. You go out
They
and
were,
find
yeah, and
a
there was
Bigfoot.
several. We had several different experiences where we were out on Bigfoot, looking for Bigfoot, but seeing lights in the sky.
Right.
So maybe we should change our tactics and go look for lights in the sky to see Bigfoot.
Well, maybe. Uh, So anyway, yeah, and Dan, John, I'm always babbling about John Keel, but years ago he hypothesized the idea of window areas to try and explain, why these things sort of, as you say, we don't have any bodies; they sort of pop in and pop out, and there also seem to be these areas that just have well, like Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and the Mothman, and the Skinwalker Ranch, etc. They're these areas that just seem to have a great deal of high strangeness and have all kinds of different uh, types of manifestations occur.
Well, that's like this Shakora gargoyle. Pretty much every report, the people say that it doesn't acknowledge their presence. It's seen like as if it's sniffing the air around it, and pretty much every one of them have stated that it's as if it's not aware of it's not aware of the area that it's in. It's not familiar with the area that it's in. So, is it possible that it's something that's interdimensional and it's slipping in between dimensions?
Does it ever look translucent, or does it look like a solid creature?
It's a solid creature.
Okay. I'm just thinking of some of the reports of, well, for example, the tall silver humanoids in Dovered Wales in 1977. They looked like the locals described them as something that looked like they were in boiler suits, but they were about 7 feet tall and could leap over, fences easily. But some of them, they would look through them and they're at their legs, and they could see the ground behind them, almost implying that maybe they're coming from somewhere else, or perhaps they're a projection, or I mean, who knows? At this stage, there's so much that's unknown, but we go out and collect these reports, and credible people, are reporting these things. Something is really going on.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's just you can't ignore it. There are too many credible witnesses out there that are having these experiences. They're seeing something, and until we physically get the remains of one or capture one of them, all we can do is really speculate. But the phenomena, it's just, if nothing more, it's so interesting. I don't know how you can't be interested in it.
Well, I agree. There's been a few times in years past when I would get kind of frustrated because, there's a lot of infighting, at least there used to be, between some of the UFO groups way back when. And I get kind of frustrating and think, well, we're not making any progress. And you kind of try to push it away for a while, but then it comes right back. The sense of wonder, the desire to try to understand what the heck is going on. And it is really there's so many layers to it, and it's so mystifying. I think we'll probably start to wrap it up pretty soon, but I know we've just barely scratched the surface with your experiences. Do you want to give us another one or two things that you would like to talk about before we wrap it up?
I know back in '82, some friends of mine had come over for the evening. We had witnessed a triangular-shaped object. The best way to describe it is if you were to take a pool rack that you put the pool balls in on a pool table, that triangle shape, hold that at arm's length, and that's how big this thing was. When we first noticed,
where was this?
It looked like this was back in '82, and it was up north of North Washington, north of Butler.
Was it kind of a rural area, or was it?
It's a rural area.
Okay.
There were many people from all over the county that had witnessed it, First saw it, looked like a translucent milky orb, like a bubble.
Right.
And it was just at treetop level. And as we stood there and watched it, we really couldn't tell if it were ascending, coming up from the ground, or if it was coming toward us. But once it was clearly above the tops of the trees, we continued to watch it. And standing looking up at a 45-degree angle, when this thing was at a 45-degree angle above us, the flat part, the pointed part of that triangle was the part that was moving forward. The flat part would have been the back of it. It was like the width of that, however long that thing was, a cobalt blue blanket of what looked like glitter started spraying out of it. And you could see this stuff, it was so thick and so dense, you could actually see it falling, although we looked afterwards and couldn't find anything on the ground. And over the years that I've talked about this, many people taking notes, and I've had some physicists and whatnot say what they think that might have been was plasma. And in any event, watch this thing, and as it was directly above us, you're looking straight up, this thing stopped. It just hanging there, no sound whatsoever. There was a light on the front bottom and a light on each corner in the back. And they didn't blink like navigation lights that you would associate with an airplane. They pulsated very erratically. Between the front point light and the back two light on the right and left side of this craft, you could clearly see on the bottom crescent-shaped openings. The bottom of it was opening up. And started to open up, and it was a full circle, and you could look up in this thing, and it was just looked like gold tinfoil. Very, very brilliant gold color. There were two metallic spheres that dropped out of the bottom simultaneously, and they bobbed up and down till those openings closed. These spheres were every bit as a Volkswagen Beetle from the distance that we were looking at. The one on the right looking up, it started spinning after the openings had closed. And of course the triangle just sat there, the lights on the bottom pulsated erratically. The sphere on the right started spinning, and sparks started flying out from the center of it like you'd associate with a sparkler. Turned to look at the one on the right, the one on the left, and in the blink of an eye, one shot north, one shot south. And when they were out of sight, the triangle, the lights on the bottom, just absolutely started going crazy. It did an erratic zigzag to the left, stopped, immediately shot to the right, and then shot straight up till it was out of sight. No sound associated with it whatsoever.
And how many people were there with you?
A friend of mine and his wife.
What was their reaction?
We were all blown away. The craziness of this is, my wife had my daughters in the bathtub, and of course they were too little to leave unattended because I ran in the house. My buddy's wife was actually in with my wife, and I ran in, and when I told them, you got to come and see this, my wife couldn't leave, but my buddy's wife joined us. I had a video camcorder, battery fully charged, full magazine, sitting on my dining room table. I had a 35 millimeter camera with a full roll of film in it sitting on my dining room table because I had been taking video and pictures of my daughters. I never once thought to grab either of those cameras. What I do is I grab a pair of binoculars and a telescope. I kick myself in the behind daily.
That's classic, Dan. Whether it's the Loch Ness monster or a Bigfoot or a UFO, it's the photographic hoodoo. It's there's something, and even sometimes when people successfully take those photographs, they either don't come out or they're too fuzzy to be anything. So don't kick yourself too hard. It's probably part of the curse of the photograph, the paranormal photograph.
There was a busload of people. They were actually was a church in West Sunbury, and of course the bus would go and pick up people, and then of course take the people home. And it was driving across Route 138, and everybody on the bus saw the exact same thing that I just described to you. The road is very windy, it's hilly, and of course there was a very high elevation in the road where the bus pulled off to the side of the road. Everyone on that bus got out, including the bus driver, and witnessed this. There were people from a town not too far from where we were called Corn City, PA. They witnessed the exact opposite of what I described to you. They witnessed these two spheres coming in and dancing around like they were chasing one another. Then all at once, the triangle just appeared out of thin air, stopped, the two spheres fell in underneath it and started bobbing up and down until the openings opened up. They went up inside the triangle, the openings closed, and the thing shot off and was gone.
When you first saw this, it was sort of like a blob of light. Is that right?
Well, the best way I can describe it, if somebody had a spotlight and was holding it 2 feet away from your face and was shining it in your eyes, that's how bright it was. But it looked like it was in a bubble, like a translucent milky orb is the best way to describe it. You could clearly see there was some type of structure inside this bubble.
Okay, so it didn't actually change shape then. It was probably the brightness of the light that made the shape unable to be seen at that point.
That is correct, yes.
Wow. The only thing that ever happened to me is I had gone out to the TNT area one time in Point Pleasant alone at night, came back to my motel room, and the TV set turned on by itself and then started flipping through stations. Now that's pretty weird, but that's the only thing that's happened to me that's kind of off the beam. So I can't even compete. I mean, we've only scratched the surface of your experiences. So Dan, I'm going to have you come back sometime, and I hope you will.
I would love to. Would absolutely love to.
So let's keep that in mind. I mean, all the stories that are untold, we will anticipate for another time. Terrie, any other things you'd like to bring up or ask Dan before we start to close?
No, but I was going to make that suggestion. You need to have a part 2 and part 3 with Dan because he has so many more interesting experiences and stories to tell.
Well, if the show has that kind of longevity, we definitely will. Dan, tell us again about how to contact you. If people are interested in the Butler Conference, what should they do?
We have a Facebook page. They can just get a hold of me via Facebook. We have a website, which right now the website, you can look at it, but we haven't been able to update it. If anybody would like to email me via the website, we're still able to email people or receive email through the website. We have many reported sightings on there. A lot of the pictures that are on there are authentic pictures that were submitted by people from all over that took pictures of UFOs. The website is www.boru-ufo.com.
And what's the date of the Paranormal Conference?
It's actually scheduled for April 24th. We're praying and hoping that we will not have to postpone it because of the coronavirus, but we're actually scheduled to have it on the 24th of April, 2021.
Well, we're all keeping our fingers crossed, and thank you for being here, Dan and Terrie. Thank you for standing by as co-host today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And we'll do it again.
Terrie, I'm sorry for hogging all the airtime.
But no,
that's okay. We're all interested in what you have to say, Dan.
It's your job. We don't want dead air, that's for sure. So no dead air with Dan Hagemen, and that's a good thing. Okay, thanks again, everybody. Everybody sit tight. I'm going to do my closeout, and then I'd like to talk to everybody after the show. The High Strangeness Factor is copyrighted on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. It was created by Steve Ward and Andy Mercer. I want to thank our fearless leaders here at the network, Irene Allen Block and Mark Johnson. I also want to thank Andy Mercer in his capacity as producer for the show, and Brian Zeller for the original theme music. I can be heard on Mac Maloney's Military X-Files as a correspondent weekly, and I have a Facebook page called The Phantom Menagerie. I'm writing a book which will be out sometime this decade, and I also was a participant in the Small Town Monsters program, the documentary of the Mothman Legacy. And I am Steve Ward, your humble host here on the High Strangeness Factor, a displaced Yank here on Paranormal UK Radio. Thank you for listening. I will see you again in a fortnight. Take care.